Ferrari arrived at the 2026 Formula One season with a rear wing that rotates 270 degrees on the straight, and the FIA has cleared it to race at the Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai. The wing carries a name that tells you everything about how the paddock received it. Fred Vasseur looked at the mechanism flipping upward, inverting almost completely, and told Canal Plus it reminded him of a dance move. And that was enough. The Macarena. A name born from a joke, attached to an idea that has rival engineers paying very close attention. Before getting into the mechanics, here is where Ferrari actually stand heading into China. At the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne, Charles Leclerc crossed the line third and Lewis Hamilton fourth, with George Russell and Kimi Antonelli handing Mercedes a 1-2 finish ahead of them. The Macarena wing stayed in the garage that weekend, unused. Shanghai is the first time it goes onto a race car in a competitive environment, and that decision tells you something important about how Ferrari views the circuit. The wing first appeared during pre-season testing in Bahrain, and the teams who noticed it had to watch several times before they understood what they were seeing. A conventional active aerodynamics flap opens along a slot, creating a gap that reduces downforce and cuts drag on the straight. Ferrari's version does none of that. The upper flap lifts, rotates through 270 degrees and arrives at a position that is nearly upside down relative to where it started, inverting the entire wing profile while the car is at full speed. What that inversion produces is lift rather than downforce at the rear of the car, which raises the bodywork slightly and strips away drag at a rate a standard opening flap simply cannot match. David Coulthard put it directly, calling the idea extraordinary from an engineering perspective, and noting that flipping the wing profile generates a drag reduction that no conventional design can replicate in the same way. Understanding why Ferrari could build this at all requires going back to what the 2026 regulations actually changed. Active aerodynamics became a headline feature of the new rules, allowing teams to adjust both front and rear wings, depending on whether the car is running on a straight or braking for a corner. Flaps closed means downforce and drag. Flaps open means speed. That basic principle had already existed under the old DRS system, but the rules governing exactly how the wing could open were strict and specific. Those restrictions no longer exist. The FIA deliberately gave teams more freedom in 2026, and Ferrari read the regulations closely enough to notice that nothing in the new rulebook requires the wing to remain the right way up when active aerodynamics are deployed. That is the gap the Macarena fills. Ferrari also built the concept to work alongside a separate device known as the exhaust wing, which extends the diffuser area and uses exhaust gases blown across the rear wing to generate downforce through corners. The two systems operate in opposite directions depending on what the car needs at any given moment, one loading the rear on corner entry, the other unloading it completely on the straight. The numbers circulating in the paddock since Bahrain testing have ranged from credible to speculative, and separating the two matters, paddock sources consistently quoted a top speed gain of between 5 and 8 kilometers per hour over a conventional active aero setup on a long straight, and that figure appeared repeatedly from reliable outlets covering the test. Some reports pushed the estimate as high as 10 kilometers per hour, though no official telemetry from Ferrari or the FIA has confirmed any specific number, and those higher figures came from less authoritative sources. Sitting with the 5 to 8 kilometer per hour range is the honest position based on what has actually been verified. On most circuits, a top speed gain in that range sits somewhere between useful and notable. Shanghai is not most circuits. The back straight at the Shanghai International Circuit runs 1.2 kilometers before arriving at turn 14, and the lap contains 4 dedicated straight mode zones where active aerodynamics can be deployed. A wing that removes drag more aggressively than any rival can match becomes a genuine, competitive weapon on a layout designed almost entirely around straight line speed. Ferrari identified that before they packed the equipment. Getting the wing cleared for competition involved considerably more than submitting a design and waiting. After the rotating mechanism appeared in Bahrain, extended conversations opened between Ferrari and the FIA to establish whether the concept sat within the regulations, and those discussions consumed real time. Ferrari ran a conventional version of the wing during the earlier part of Bahrain test week, closer in operation to the old DRS, and then reverted to the rotating design later in the week once the engineering team had gathered enough data to justify continuing down that path. Nicholas Tombazis, the FIA's single-seater technical director, eventually offered the clearest public statement on where the governing body stood. His words were, "We have, generally speaking, encouraged solutions that reduce drag." Tombazis confirmed that the strict limits from the DRS era were deliberately not carried into the 2026 rules, that the intention was to give teams wider freedom, and that the Ferrari solution, in the FIA's assessment, is okay. There are still parameters around how quickly the mechanism must operate and how the car must present under certain viewing angles, but within those boundaries the wing is fully legal. The version heading to Shanghai is understood to be the first fully validated iteration of the design. Ferrari are sending 3 specifications of the wing to China, with engineers carrying the components onto the plane as cabin baggage rather than shipping them in freight. Whether the team runs the wing during the single practice session available on a sprint weekend or commits it directly to sprint qualifying remains a garage decision. The hardware will be trackside either way. Fred Vasseur chose his words carefully after Melbourne when the subject of upcoming updates came up. His stated goal was to close the gap to Mercedes by working harder and moving faster than the competition. And when a journalist asked specifically whether upgrades could appear in China, Vasseur gave a one-line answer. Difficult, only a week to go. That answer sounds like a hedge, and then Ferrari loaded 3 Macarena wing specs onto a plane to Shanghai. Vasseur's public caution and Ferrari's actual logistics point in completely different directions, and the logistics tell the real story. Planning is already underway for what comes after the China debut. Autoracer reported that a second-generation version of the design, referred to in those reports as Macarena version 2, is being prepared for introduction at the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. The wing that runs in Shanghai is not the endpoint. Ferrari are treating it as the first stage of a development program that extends through the season. The wider picture of Ferrari's 2026 campaign gives that development ambition a specific urgency. Vasseur acknowledged after Melbourne that the competitive order from the opening round rarely holds as the season develops, and that the teams who bring the most targeted updates, finding tenths of a second per lap within the budget cap, are the ones who end the year in a different position to where they started. The Macarena wing represents Ferrari's first move in that process, and it is a bigger move than a standard aerodynamic update. Most upgrades refine what is already there. A revised floor edge, a different front wing end plate shape, a change to the beam wing geometry. Those improvements compound over a season, but they do not redefine how a car performs in a specific phase of the lap. The Macarena does something different. A 270-degree rotating rear wing that inverts its profile at full speed is a systemic shift in how Ferrari manage drag on a straight, and rivals who want to respond cannot simply take what Ferrari have done and copy it onto their own car in a few weeks. The concept requires its own design, its own structural engineering, its own discussions with the FIA. Red Bull, Mercedes, and the rest of the field have all taken note, and their aerodynamics departments will already be working through what a response looks like. What arrives in Shanghai this week is a rear wing that no Formula One car has ever raced in competition before, backed by FIA approval, 3 copies loaded as hand luggage, and a circuit that suits it better than almost anywhere else on the calendar. Ferrari finished the opening round behind Mercedes and need to find performance quickly. The Macarena is where they have chosen to look for it first. Whether the gap to Mercedes closes in Shanghai or the wing needs further development before it fully delivers, the Chinese Grand Prix is about to answer questions that the entire paddock has been asking since Bahrain. Ferrari have done the engineering work, cleared the regulatory process, and chosen their moment. The Macarena is on its way to Shanghai. If you want to follow how this develops as the 2026 season unfolds, subscribe and stay with the channel, because this one is going to run for a while.